if not felt, welcome. There are no fire alarms planned for this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please meet at the Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of this meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being filmed and made available to view in the live and archive form via the Cabinet website, Council's website. If you are seated in the public gallery, it's possible that the cameras may capture your image. If you wish to avoid being filmed, it is recommended you make a member of the staff aware who will direct you where to sit. The Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked at sunset, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. Okay. So, thankfully tonight we have a speaker, and we'll just go through this formal introduction there. So before we start working through the agenda, we will receive representations from members of the public. These can be on any subject as long as the speaker has registered with us in advance and lives or works in the district. Each speaker will have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The whole public representation section will last a maximum of 20 minutes. We have one speaker registered to make representations tonight. There will be no discussion following the speaker's contribution, but Cabinet members may later refer to the issues raised if pertinent in the agenda. It's a 20-minute session extended by another 10 minutes if we want to, but hopefully we won't need to do that. And I'd like to invite Daniel Smythe to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes.
In Orange Street, and I lived in a building which is attached to the other side of the Debenhams, which is abandoned. During last year, we had an incident where someone climbed on top of the roof and was throwing rocks and bricks from the top of it into the courtyard. So I wanted to know, in the short term, what's being done to secure these buildings, make sure no one can go inside of them and incidents like that can't happen. I know the fire was caused by a 15-year-old able to break in there and start the fire. And as I understand it, Nasons also have a problem with homeless people going there, stay warm. So what could be done in the short term to make sure no one has access to those buildings? And in the long term, I wondered what was the plan to develop those and make sure that they aren't derelict for much longer. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. I won't answer it directly, but I will say that obviously there's some work going on at Nasons already to make sure that Nasons is totally secure. And so we'd work there as well. And we are working and have been working for a long, long time to get the developments over the line. Nutrient neutrality was the issue where we couldn't grant planning permission, loads of other things as well. So we're very much aware of it, but also very, very aware of the situation that you describe. And thank you for bringing it to our attention. We appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so welcome again to the agenda part of the meeting of Cabinet. Cabinet is the part of the council responsible for the day-to-day decisions, most day-to-day decisions. It is chaired by the leader, who is elected by the council, and that's me, Alan Baldock. The other Cabinet members are as follows: Councillor Sol, Deputy Leader, and the Cabinet Member for Finance. Councillor Dixie, Cabinet Member for Property and Performance. Councillor Hazelton, Cabinet Member for Housing. Councillor Dawkins, Cabinet Member for Environment and Climate Change. Councillor Charlotte Cornell, Cabinet Member for Council Services, Culture and Heritage. Councillor Chris Cornell, Cabinet Member for Economic Development and Inclusion and Coastal Towns Champion. Councillor Ricketts, Cabinet Member for Tourism, Transport and the Rural Champion. And Councillor Nolan, Community Engagement, Safety and Enforcement. The Cabinet collectively provides strategic leadership to the Council. Okay. So, Vanessa, apologies for absence.
Just apologies for lateness from Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you. That's good. Declarations of interest by members or officers. Any so far? Okay.
None in advance, Chair.
Okay. Okay. Does any cabinet member wish to make an announcement this evening? Okay, that's fine. We have no public participation in the agenda items tonight, do we? So, okay, so we've moved through public part 4, item 4. Minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of November. I will propose those minutes. If I could have a seconder, please.
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Sol. And if we're happy, we can do that by general assent. But of course, you're very welcome to make comments of corrections if there are any to be made. Okay, do we have general assent for that? Thank you for that. So we take those minutes as correct. There are no references from committees to this particular cabinet meeting. So we now move through item 6 and on to item 7, which is the audit plan review of the days. A bit quirky, but what I really would like to do is to ask Councillor Sol to introduce that item for us. And when he's happy that he's introduced it, I'm sure one of you he will propose it and one of you will be very obliged to second it for him, and then we'll start any comments or questions and debate that we need to do. Okay with that, Mike?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the Audit Committee for raising this issue, as it's essential that we have an internal audit programme that ensures that this council is fit for purpose and the challenges that all local authorities face. In July this year, the Internal Auditor's Report went to the Audit Committee. The minutes of that meeting state that the head of the East Kent Audit Partnership presented the report that provided a summary of the external quality assessment of the Internal Audit Service, asking members to note the report and the appendices. A summary was provided of the key points, with the report highlighting specific areas of interest to the committee. The Chair commended the work of the East Kent Audit Partnership in achieving a generally conforms rating, which is the highest rating available and compares favourably with others in the sector. So I think that gives some context to our internal audit processes. There are times when benchmarking against other authorities is an appropriate thing to do, but we do need to add in local context. It would, in my opinion, be wrong to conclude that our internal audit procedures are inadequate as we do not have as many hours as other authorities. Simply adding in additional hours when we already received the highest possible rating would not be a sensible use of resources. However, I do not rule out finding the necessary budgetary funding to boost our internal audit procedures should circumstances or risk factors change. Combating potential fraud and risks from cyber attack must remain priorities, and our approach must be reactive to evolving threats. The internal audit programme is reassessed annually by senior officers and then agreed with the head of internal audit and the head of finance in March. And this year, I will be involved in those discussions so we can ensure that this council has robust internal audit procedures and that appropriate funds are allocated from the budget to cover this. I therefore propose that we neither keep things as they are, nor carry out a blanket increase in hours without a review of the changes in risk. So instead, I propose the option A as set out in the agenda, which is A, to give delegated authority to the Section 151 officer in conjunction with the relevant cabinet member to review the level of need of additional days that would be required, and that could be facilitated within the budget and resources available. If I can have a seconder for that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelton. Okay. Okay, is any thoughts or comments on that? Thanks, Chris. Please go ahead.
Yes, I mean, I'd agree with Mike's summary. I think that the key point here is not necessarily hitting a benchmark just for the sake of hitting benchmark. I'd like to see far more data, for example, as to what proportion of audit days are given to authorities with sizable social housing investment portfolios, for example, or the extent to which it depends on kind of other key factors like whether they operate kind of internal services or operate them from LSVTs. So I'd kind of appreciate a model which is more like a kind of zero-sum budgeting, as in we begin to look at what we think we need and whether we want to specifically allocate those for certain types of services. I think it would also be useful to see if we're going to establish a day to talk about flexibility within the contract. I know that sometimes when we've sat on audit, something comes up and then immediately you're like, could we squeeze some more audit days within year? And it's often difficult because effectively the budget's set. So if we're going to relook at how the contract operates and what the size of it is, I think looking at that flexibility would be important. But I agree with the kind of the measured approach, which is let's look at what we need, let's look at what we can afford, and let's start the conversation with audit going. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I'm sure Michael want to come back on that. Michael Dixie, Councillor
Yes,
Dixie.
I have a question. Did previous audits assess the council's exposure? Did previous audits assess the council's exposure to cyber attack?
Okay. Do you want to take the first one, Mike? Because I think you sort of answered in your statement there, but probably need a little bit more clarity in that.
I think on the first one, on Chris's point, I would certainly take all of those into account when we discuss what is going to be planned for next year, and make sure we are flexible for the needs of the audit. And we, you don't just do what you've done before because you've always done it, and you look at what needs to be done this year. On Michael's specific point, I'm afraid I can't answer that in detail, but one of the officers here may be able to.
Yeah, so somebody pick that up for us? Thank you, Nikki. Nikki Mills.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was in the audit review previously. However, as you can see in the audit plan now, it's in there. Cyber is in there every year and broken down into more elements. So it would have been on the rolling cycle. We'd have to look back to see the detail of how often, how regularly, every year or every few years it was in there. But cyber would have been included as a general audit.
Did they make any recommendations? Because quite clearly we've suffered a devastating attack and it should have been flagged up by the audit that we were vulnerable to this because our systems were not the best in the world and we were exposed. And this, I don't think, was picked up by the audit people. And that I find pretty staggering.
Do you know the answer to that, anybody? Or do you want to take that away and find out what the report was about the cyber attack in whenever it was last reported? I think the key bit is obviously from now onwards, that's exactly the point Mike raises, that we need to be on top of that. And if that'll be probably almost certainly part of something that we do, won't it? I think it's naturally do that. So, does anyone pick that up at all? Or shall we just come back on and just give us a written answer on that? Yeah? Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, not a problem at all. That's fine. Okay, so we get a written answer on that one. That'd be fine. Thank you for that. A copy of the report at the time. Yeah, thanks. Just summarising there, some interesting points. Obviously, really, we need to be flexible and sensible and pragmatic with our auditing, but that doesn't mean to say we need to be in any way. We do what we need to do, and we do it well. And that I think is good practice, which I think is in the bottom of your mind at this moment in time, isn't it? And just push it forward there. So.
It's not us doing it well, it's the auditors doing it well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I have a very strong feeling that they've been negligent.
Okay,
put it
Michael,
bluntly.
yeah. Just one second.
That's it. It's a major risk. It was a major risk to us, and it hadn't been flagged up, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay, we'll find out whether it had or hadn't, of course, when we come the answers back on that. You want to take that point now, Tricia, or wait for Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think we've said we'll come back on that because it's not a question that we were prepared for this evening. We were talking about number of audit days and adequacy of audit days. It is quite a specialist area, cybersecurity, and actually we have other things that we do outside internal audit to check our preparedness for cyber attacks, and that's something that we looked at immediately afterwards as well. So I think audit is part of the jigsaw, but they're not the sole part of the jigsaw in terms of preventing and responding to cyber attacks. Thank you.
Councillor Chris Cornell.
Yeah, I mean, I take Councillor Dixley's point, but I think the key point here is audit's first job is to make sure that we're doing what we say we're going to do, so to speak. And that's sometimes quite difficult when a service is transitioning between one governance arrangement to another. I think if there are questions, you know, the auditors look at that as a process, but they're not specialists in each of the distinct skills that they're operating in. Their skill is in auditing. And if it's an additional question about how prepared we are, I think it's as much us having confidence in the other internal systems that we have in place to deal with cybersecurity in the same way that we would have positions to deal with fraud. I would expect an auditor to challenge the systems that we have in place for fraud and ask effectively if they are sufficient to do. But I think it's difficult to necessarily place the everything that goes wrong at the door of auditors, so to speak, in this process. But I would hope that pragmatically what we can do going forward is, in understanding what we want from the service, also have a conversation with members of the audit committee about what the expectation is, and if there are particular areas where we think there are new ways of doing things, or whether there are bits of best practice we can pick up, perhaps in quite specific pieces of work, with the IT being identified in this new audit plan as something which will happen on an ongoing and annual basis, in contrast to historically, where it's just sat as a, as a standard risk on the matrix. I think that would be useful.
Can I come back on that, please, Alan?
Just come back on that, Michael, and then we're
it's quite clear part of the auditor's role is to assess the council's exposure to risk. It's actually written down on the papers. And exposure to risk, is a key part. It's not just checking our bean counting.
Okay. Tricia, could you just summarise that where we are, and then obviously the next steps, and then we'll agree or disagree with this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Cornell's given a good description of the role of the auditors. They do take account of risk. They do take account of our risk register, which is feedback. It's something. It's where the laptop's next to the mic, apparently. So they will look at the risk specific to the council. They will also look at what they call the audit universe, I think, and look at risk across all public bodies. So cyber security would have been part of that. And just reflecting back to when that incident happened and the impact, it's definitely had a very significant impact on the council. But I would remind councillors that we had the lightest cyber attack that you could have. We lost no systems, we lost no data, we weren't blackmailed, anything like that. And if you look at what's been happening in other places, that is very much the pattern that other councils have seen. So I think actually we demonstrated that we actually had controls in place, and when that happened, we actually ended up in the best position we could do in the circumstances.
Sure, I'm in no way criticising the council. Can I make that clear?
It's fine. So just because there's a little debate on that, I'm just going to, if it's okay, you might read out the resolution, which we've got proposed and seconded, and then we'll take a vote on it now. Okay. So to resolve, to delegate authority to the Section 151 officer in conjunction with the relevant cabinet member to review the level of need of additional days that would be required and that could be facilitated within the budget and resources available. So that's what we're going to vote for or against. So vote for is to accept that resolution. So thank you.
That's carried unanimously, Chair.
Thank you there. Okay. Seriously?
That was carried unanimously, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, so next item, that's item 8. It's a revenue and capital Q2 budget monitoring forecast report. And again, most of tonight is the Mike Soul show. So, so if I could ask Mike just to introduce that item. I know Nikki is here, Nikki Mills is here, so I'll be able to sort of pick up any questions and bits and pieces as we go through. So again, Mike, if you wouldn't mind, if you could just sort of summarise it, and then we only have to note the report, so we don't need this seconded at all. So, okay.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think it's a show many people would buy tickets for. So on this agenda item, we're being asked to note the report showing the 6-monthly update of the council's finances, comparing the budgets to the actual figures. The document itself sets out the significant variances, so I'm not going to read them all out. I'm sure you've read them and they're there if you've got any specific questions. It's typical at this time of year to have a number of overspends and underspends across budget headlines, but the key figure is the overall net position. As a summary at the end of the report says, the forecast for the general fund revenue budget is currently an overspend of £175,000 at the year end. So measures will need to be put in place to reduce this forecast overspend, and savings allocated need to be identified within the current financial year. The financial situation in the housing revenue account continues to improve and will continue to be monitored to ensure it carries on in that way. Opportunities to curtail expenditure and maximise income need to continue to be sought to ensure that financial stability into the future. Now, I'm especially pleased that the HRA budget has been turned around, and credit should be given to all of those involved in achieving that. The report does include further detailed budgetary deviations, and if Cabinet members have any questions, I'm sure that Nikki or someone else will be able to give further information. Officers will continue to monitor the budget, maximise income and expenditure over the rest of the council year in order to seek to reduce the projected budget overspend and to avoid significant use of reserves. So that's just for noting. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mike. That's much appreciated. Anyone got some comments to make? I've got Councillor Dawkins.
Apologies for my lateness as well. Okay, yeah, I just got a couple of questions for Councillor Soul, if that's okay. I understand that where we are in the quarterly, and it's never the end of the year, is it? But I noticed on page 3 about the printing, the case services, that there's quite a large overspend there, and because we've lost a contract, and it says that you're working on a strategy to win back some. I just wondered if we could have a bit more detail about what that strategy is to bring back that income that we so sadly lost. And also the EKS overspend for customer service monthly charges at 59,000. Is that? I take it that's monthly, not. I take it that's yearly, not monthly. The off-street parking. I know we're going to be talking about this later as the years go on, but as we all know, KCC might be taking over that contract, so that is one of our biggest income providers. And have we got any sort of plans in place how to avoid that? The loss of income. Those are just a couple of questions. If a bit more detail.
Is there anyone that's got any questions? We'll take a little batch of them if not. Chris? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, my question was related to the forecast overspend in revenue and benefits, which is about central government not paying as much as perhaps we would have identified and budgeted for. I just wanted to know if those, if the subsidies falling short in supported accommodation and temporary accommodation were persistent problems or an in-year variance.
That's fantastic. Okay, shall we take those? Do you want to take those, Nikki, or do you want Mike to take them? It's up to you. Yeah, thank you, Nikki. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So a few questions there. The printing, I don't know the detail, but I think they're looking at all different options that they have across the board, whether it's reducing expenditure or increasing income from different avenues. So I think a lot's been looking into that. And off-street parking, there are discussions with KCC about the how we fund that, not necessarily taking the whole costs across because it's all different across all districts, but also transferring the contributions across to KCC relating to off-street parking, which we are in conversations with them about that and how it's allocated up. It may be a income generator on one hand, but it also there's a lot of costs associated with that as well. So it's not just an income generator to us. And so we're looking at what we share with KCC within the agreement to share the net profit on that. Revs and bends is a really good question, and not that the others weren't good questions, sorry, but it's a very significant amount, isn't it? And it at the moment is an ongoing issue, that it's not just an in-year issue, but we are trying to see what we can do within the council and how we allocate people to whether or not we can reduce those the impact to us. But at the moment it is an ongoing thing until we get decision from government of how they fund these things properly. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. That's really quite helpful, a couple of those points. And I certainly know that East Kent, or Kent leaders across all the councils are trying to get some vague resemblance of a decision and sense out of the on-street parking. It's not a fortune, but it's some councils it's really high numbers, and others it's not so good, and it's a little different for everybody. So there's one question I was going to just ask a little bit of clarity, and that is broadly looking for the sort of outline of the plan for. We've got to this point in the year, quite a significant time into the year, with a huge underspend on planned maintenance and improvements, and of the HRA kind of element of this work. There's some reasons down there which is okay, but it concerns me because broadly, when resources are short in the way of delivery of these projects, just through available contractors, teams and staff, it's very hard to catch up spend. So we need to be really careful next year we don't overburden and keep piling up work to do, which we can't resource to do. So I think we need to take this moment now, halfway point, and really see what we can do to boost that through and to try to drive that delivery up as much as we can. Although there's positions in there, do we have an estimate where we think we'd be at the end of this year? I mean, we're not going to be spending that amount of money, I would imagine, but do we know how much we would need to carry over for work that is needed? Because this is all work that's needed, so it's not going to not go away.
Thank you, Chair. The figures that are in the report are the estimates that will be spent at the end of the year. Every year with the housing revenue account, we rebase what is required. We don't carry forward, we start afresh each year to see what actually is needed next year rather than just keep carrying forward every year. But however, if there are any activities that have been delayed or carry over into the next year, then obviously the budget is increased to accommodate that. So in that case, they are carried over, but the budget gets rebased every year.
The budget gets rebased, but of course the work is carried over. The unfinished work is carried over to be done at a later date, but the budget is reset. Yeah, so it's the same thing but different, isn't it? Really. So the same problem arises. Councillor Hazel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think I completely agree with you, Alan, about that. The capital spend that's required, from the HRA, and there's a number of reasons why that's the case, but that doesn't mean we're not, you know, officers aren't focusing on pushing that forward. But I do agree with you that we want to upgrade and improve our housing stock, particularly areas obviously where there's compliance and so on. That's obviously prioritised, but the other work really desperately needs to be done, and we've now secured the in-house surveyors to undertake the stock condition survey, so that we're in a good position to know what we need to do. But I would like to make another comment as well about the HRA account that Mike, you talked about. So I don't think it's going to affect the position this financial year, but I just want to remind Cabinet that in the spring, the government is expected to bring forward its government housing strategy, which I think will have major implications for all sorts of elements of our HRA and for HRAs, across the country. And also just to remind Cabinet that Canterbury City Council is one of 109 local authorities that are, pushing and responding, on a regular basis with central government about that document securing the future of council housing. And I'm promoting that with our MPs, and Marie is also promoting that through consultations and responding to make sure that when that does come out in the spring, that we hopefully get as many of our asks as possible to put the HRA on a more sustainable footing going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to that, Pip. It is an amazingly good document, isn't it? Clear and straightforward. It's a good read. So that's amazing work. Councillor Charlotte Cornell.
Thank you, Chair. Note the underspend in IT services that's mentioned at the end of the document, and just picking up on some concerns that Michael raised at an earlier point in the agenda. Obviously, this is due to perhaps staffing or resourcing, and you know that there's a bigger piece of work that needs to take place generally. Just with the budget being reset and that bigger piece of work being alluded to in the document, is that being taken into account in next year's financial trailing? I also note, and I'm pleased to note, the increase in parking at Canterbury West, the multi-storey, and that's reviving with more use of the trains post-COVID. And I'd just like to be illuminated on the higher electricity costs at Reculver Caravan Park. What is that, and are we looking at a new supplier, or was that a temporary issue? Thank you.
Please go ahead, Nicola. Leave time to find that bit in the notes. Go for it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think they're very detailed, good questions that we don't know off the top of our heads. So I'll have to come back to you with the detail on that from the officers.
Councillor Ricketts.
I can speak a little bit both to IT and to parking. I hope you'd be glad to know. I know in IT, and I won't go into detail this evening, but a huge amount of work's been done in various cost savings that will have come through this year, and some more that are looking to come through next year as well. And some of that is just in terms of looking at some of the licenses that were agreed before, some rationalisation, working out that we can do things a bit better with other forms of technology as well. So it's been a bit of a side benefit, as I understand it, from the cyber attack, that it's given us a chance to have a look at the systems that we were operating and become a bit more efficient. Now, I'm not sure what that entire figure entails in this, but I know that there's been a lot of good work going in IT in that. So, and in terms of parking, again, good to see that as is always the nature of these things, that we can't accurately predict where is going to do very well and where is going to do very badly, but actually, broadly speaking, very, very good news from city centre car parks in Canterbury in terms of usage. Station Road West, not just due to the increase in uptick in train travel as well, but also I'd like to think that we've demonstrated that cars are moving from some of the car parks to the others. Station Road West, it was always part of the plan to encourage more people to use Station Road West, so it's good to see that in there, and thank you very much for pointing that out.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. It's good to see the plan unfolding, isn't it? And also the points about the IT really important, and you know, we've not stopped still, and we are trying to make it better. And it was good that we had this problem, we got over it, and we've done the right things now moving forward. So that's good. Any other points at all to raise? Just give you a moment to think. Okay. In that case, are we all happy to note that report and move forward? Okay. But no vote, just to note, isn't it? So if you just indicate that you're happy with that, that's good. Thank you for that. It's appreciated. So we move away from the Mike Soul show to the Alex Ricketts show now. Okay, so this one is item 9, the Visitor Economy Working Group. The idea here is that we approve some basic terms of reference for that working group. Just it's a cabinet working group, so we're going to give it a steer. So Susie will be looking after that from the officer point of view. But Alex, if you'd like to introduce how you see this, we can obviously comment or work through that, and we'll agree that at the end of beg his pardon. Yeah, if you could just propose it and seek a seconder with your summing up, please, Alex. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Yes, to start off with, I would like to propose that we adopt the draft terms of reference as written in the minutes. There are 3 options, which, if you'd like to, I can go through. If I can scroll down to them. Option 1 is to adopt the draft terms of reference for the Visitor Economy Working Group, which is the recommended option to allow work on the group to progress next year, to amend the draft terms of reference to the Visitor Economy Working Group, or to not adopt the draft terms of reference, not allowing the group to progress further at this point in time. Do I have a seconder for option 1?
Seconded.
After the Mike Soul show comes the Mike Soul seconding. This has been a long time coming, and you'll see through the breadth of these terms of reference why it's taken a while for us to get to this point, because there are a number of issues that we wanted to address, I think, when we all came in, that we rolled into this group. And I think this gives a really, really strong steer for a group to be able to examine the issues as a whole. Because when you look at one of the issues, you of course have to take the other issues into account as well. So primarily, the group will be there to first of all assess the current state of the visitor economy in the whole district, which is something that is sorely needed. And this is looking at everything within the district as well, not just the state of some of the things we know about, but having a look at some of those emerging factors that are helping people visit the district as well. And the second part of what the group is tasked to do is to look at the most sustainable and effective ways that the City Council can intervene to influence improving the visitor economy. And this is all about what we can do to help. Within that, there are a couple of big ticket items. There are a couple of things that have been presented to us that people have made representations that they want this council to examine. Obviously, one of those that's garnered a lot of headlines is examining short-term lets within the district, how that works. Obviously, that includes Airbnbs, but is not limited to them. How that works within the district, how that works with other accommodation provision in the district as well. And it is important to have a look at that from a district-wide perspective rather than just looking at areas where it's perhaps been a problem, that there are also opportunities within that area and opportunities within accommodation more broadly. The other one that has been presented to us a lot is the idea of a Herne Bay seaside board, similar perhaps in scope to a Whitstable Harbour board or something different, or perhaps closer to the Canterbury bid in nature, something along those lines, which I think that there is a rising groundswell that people are interested in looking at. This working group will give an opportunity for people to examine how that would work alongside other initiatives within the district. for those not familiar with working groups, which I think everybody in the room probably is very familiar with working groups, but they will hear evidence from external bodies. They will speak to everybody. They can call people in to speak to them as well. And there will be an opportunity to brief the rest of council as well on those issues, to act as effectively a first level of consultation on some of the findings from that group. It is quite a broad set of terms of reference, and I would be expecting people, I know that we've had conversations about how those terms of reference should go forward. It is necessarily quite broad. It is a very, very important issue, and I think this is going to be a working group that might even come close to rivaling the local plan working group in terms of the amount of work it gets through over time, but that is as it should be. Well, let's set it up with some bad news, and then when it's not quite as involved as that, the councillors involved will be quite happy. But it will be the usual selection of councillors from different groups. I think 4 Labour, 2 Lib Dem, 2 Conservative, and 1 Green is the makeup as proposed. I have a feeling that there are people within those groups already who are very interested in this, and I suspect we won't be short of people wanting to be part of this as well. I'm really glad that we're at the position where we can start to get this thing underway. I look forward to seeing what the group will come up with and what they will discuss. And I am, of course, happy to say it is a cabinet working group. So I'm obviously happy if anybody's got any ideas as to how those terms of references could be tweaked or changed or tightened, or any ideas for what the group should look at, then now might be the time to speak.
Thanks, Alice. So we have Alex, so we have that proposed and seconded. I will probably just for clarity, you did mention it, and I should have mentioned it earlier on. I do have an influence in the short-term holiday let. It was my parents' old bungalow, which we rent as a holiday let. So obviously I won't be sitting on the working group, so it won't be there. And I'm very much welcome an open debate about that particular as well. So it's worth making a note that I'm very clear at this early stage. Right, any other comments? Mike Soul, Councillor Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of phrases I wanted to pick up from the report. At the start, with the definition, you're sort of defining what a visitor is really, and it talks about visitor interactions with destinations outside their usual environment. And later in the report, we talks about visitors to the district, and I wanted to make the point that the visitor economy, to me, is just as important from somebody in Canterbury visiting Herne Bay as it is somebody from London going to Herne Bay. And just to make sure that when the working group focuses its work, it doesn't just think about bringing people into the district, but it's making sure that people who live in the district also stay and enjoy things that are in the district, because travelling from some of the villages to Whitstable is as far as going down to Folkestone or something. So just making sure that we don't get too focused on external visitors, and we also think about those who are already within the district.
That's a really good point, Mike. Do you want to come back on that?
That is an absolutely excellent point, and I think that we look at this in some of the areas, and this is probably where mine and Chris Cornell's briefs intersect slightly, because absolutely. I mean, I would say one of the main benefits of living in this district is the fact that you don't actually have to leave the district to experience all sorts of wonderful things. That when people come to stay with you, you as a resident are often their tour guide and accommodation provider, and our residents are a hugely important part of the visitor economy. But as you say, absolutely, how many summer days do we spend going up to the seaside at Whitstable or Herne Bay, or popping out to the villages for a day trip? It's a massive part of the economy, and I think that's a really, really good point to have a look at.
Connie Nolan.
Thank you. I really welcome this. I think it's well overdue, to be quite honest. I'm actually going to broaden it more, because I see the district as being sort of distinct in its uniqueness. We have a Victorian, Edwardian Victorian seaside town in Herne Bay. We have sort of almost a Penzance type fisherman's place in Whitstable, which Whitstable people tell me it's because, you know, Canterbury City Council ignored them for so long, and that develops the charm. We have the villages, which are absolutely beautiful, and we have an international magnet, which is Canterbury. And I just wanted to just sort of counter Councillor Sol's view of, yes, it's important the visitor economy is about sort of people in Canterbury enjoying it. But I think for too long, the reason I welcome this is because I think for too long, the council has been a little bit sort of too laid back about the fact that Canterbury is a magnet internationally, and has always been a magnet internationally. And I would like to see that, you know, one of the things that the working group starts to do is talk about units of measurement, on the basis that we need to measure, we need a common unit of measurement around what exactly does come into the visitor economy. And I know that there's lots of lessons that can be learnt from elsewhere. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. But one of the things that always has stayed with me is the way that the Disney Corporation actually makes sure that when they've got their visitors there, they have a fantastic experience, and they know exactly where each dollar is spent. And they rule that with an iron rod, I know. But one of the things is actually looking at and using common measurements. And I know the bid, I'll pay tribute to Lisa Carlson and Rachel at the bid. The bid are very good at that. So it's not about, as I say, starting from scratch. It's actually using those stakeholders to actually come forward on that. So I very much welcome this, yes.
Yeah, thanks, Connie. Any other points? I'll come back to you in a minute, Alex. Michael.
Thank you, Alan. And there are many other councils with large visitor economies. And Whitstable Harbour has already been mentioned. When the Harbour Board was originally formed, the board members went round to visit a number of similar harbours, and we learnt a great deal from them. Can I suggest that when this working group is set up, we visit other councils with large visitor economies and not completely try and reinvent the wheel, but learn from some of their lessons? Because I think there's a lot of knowledge out there which we can tap into and come up with a really good solutions.
Thank you, Michael. I mean, my view is that a working group does what it needs to do to come up with the goods, you know, and if it needs to go and have a wander, it goes to wander. You know, that's what's important, that we get this right, and it's absolutely underpins everything that we do in this district, and it's so important to our, if you like, what we are as a council, and we're recognising that for the first time for many, many years, to be quite honest. Okay, any other points at all? I've got Mel, Councillor Mel Dawkins.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the report. And yeah, just a couple of comments from me, and just making sure that tourism is exclusive and accessible to everyone. So I don't know if you could put something in where, and that leads me on to transport, and you know, you come along and you're a tourist, but if you can't get around, so making that, so all of that, making it accessible and exclusive. There's always, I mean, I've got a friend who's a wheelchair user, and she has to do tons of research just before she travels anywhere to make sure she can actually get around. So all that sort of stuff. I don't know if you want to put, and then and obviously with my portfolio hat on, you put sustainable ways in which the council can influence, and taking that means in terms of nature and climate as well.
In all senses.
All senses of the words. Brilliant. Okay. Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mel. Good points. Did I see Chris? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'll just pick up a few points in the Venn diagram, which is between mine and Alex's portfolio. To pick up Connie's point, there are sustainable metrics. Visit Kent operates something, a model run by the University of Cambridge, which provides statistics. In fact, the next data releases tomorrow. But I think that there is a sensible, which is largely kind of survey based. But I think if you look at a number of the kind of strategic regeneration bids that we've put in, we've often kind of supplemented those with additional information. And since we lost Shop by the Sea and by In the Bay, I think that there is a sensible question about how we're collecting information at that kind of lower level. I think the bid does it quite well for Canterbury, but I think that there is a question about what we put in at that base level. Now, those types of metrics and collection of metrics are expensive and quite complicated to do. And I think that one of the things which is quite useful in this piece of work is scoping out what the council can lead in tourism and what we can influence. And here it's about saying we can better use our open spaces and make them more attractive, that they become places which people will travel to on their own. But we look at how we control the public realm as a place by which we can help with wayfinding and people moving through locations. Obviously, we have a number of specific kind of tourist attractions that we run ourselves, like the Beanie and the museum, in contrast to other local authorities. But I would kind of reflect and agree with you that for the last couple, and I think it was Michael's comment, that for the last couple of years, we've kind of just let tourism get on with it and thought that it's okay and we've got a cathedral and as a result it's going to be kind of great. I think this is us trying to re-establish what our part of that jigsaw is and where we can lead on it and do things which other people can't, and how we can grow the value and not just the total numbers of this kind of key part of our economy. So I think there's some good scope in the project which will help us kind of define that when we come to the end of it, and certainly that's my ambition, that we have a clearer kind of offer to tourist related businesses, which is to say you continue to grow your market, you bring fantastic experiences to the people who visit our district. This is the basics that you can expect of a local authority in helping you do that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. I think that's it. I mean, it's been, unfortunately, in Canterbury, it's been in decline. That's exactly the point you make about we didn't know our place. We didn't make the best out of what we got. Now it's our chance to turn that corner and make this the most brilliant place that it really is, this whole district, isn't it? And all of us work together to get that over the line. And like everything, you need a starting point. And this is just a starting point, I would say, to get ourselves organised and in line. So very much welcome this. It's been proposed and seconded. I think that was to accept the draft terms and conditions, or terms and conditions on employment, didn't it? But the draft terms of the working group. Quite all right. So to vote for that is to accept that those are a starting point for this working group. We can always have another practice if we need to vote in a second. Yeah.
The systems weren't warmed up, but yeah, that's voted unanimously, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll just get to the end of our agenda now. Hang on. Okay, well, item 10 now. The final substantive item of our agenda today. This is the note report on the housing performance half-yearly report on that. So this is one's going to be introduced by Councillor Hazelton, Cabinet Member for Housing. And Marie Royal is here to answer questions, help us along there and make sure we understand what we're going to be noting in this report. We're not voting for or against, we're going to be just noting the content of this report. So let's make sure we all understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, as Alan says, it's a report to note, and it's the first 6 months, April to September 24, performance for housing, tenancy and facilities management. It's a good report, for which I thank Marie and the officers for their work on that. And I know that you will have read it through yourselves, but and so I'm very happy to try to answer any questions, or Marie is happy to do so. But I just wanted to bring attention really to the conclusions which appear on pages 63 and 64 of your your pack. So the headlines are about compliance. We're really pleased with our progress in terms of compliance. In terms of repairs, Cardos missed their performance target for routine repairs and appointments kept, but did meet their performance target for emergency repairs. Swale heating haven't met theirs, so that's an area that's obviously being focused on. Voids we aren't able to report on, but that's because of the changing contractor, and so there's a new process that hasn't yet integrated with our reporting system, but that will feed through before the end of the year and will be available for the end of the year report. In terms of tenant arrears, performance targets have been met, and while garage arrears, the performance target hasn't been met as yet, the amount is owing is reducing month on month, and so we're confident of meeting that target too. Something that I'm concerned about is the payment of contracted invoices. The cyber attack certainly did affect that earlier in the year, and we've also had long-term staff sickness in that area of service. It is expected to improve in the new year with recruitment of new staff, but I very much expect to see an improvement in paying of contractor invoices, particularly where we have small contractors. That's really important for their cash flow, that their money goes through, and that, you know, even larger contractors have smaller subcontractors, and so as a local authority we need to perform well in that area. So that's something that I'm looking at. Complaints, performance is up on our previous year. Targets still not met, and it remains a high priority. I think when I attend residents' engagement panel and other representative bodies of council tenants, how complaints are dealt with is a really major source of concern. It's not the issues themselves, as the issue themselves is it will be important to tenants, but how we respond to poor performance. If we don't do that well, that compounds people's dissatisfaction, understandably so, and so that's an area of focus. Just to note as well that we are revising our key performance indicators so that future reporting will be more targeted and meaningful in the areas that matter most to tenants, because, you know, I want to make sure that what we're reporting on is relevant and meaningful. And but I think that there are areas that we're pleased about, that where we're making progress, where we've continued to keep high standards, but there are areas where we still need to improve our performance. And I know that staff are working really hard and keeping me informed, and, you know, I'm challenging where I need to on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, sir. Anybody else got comments? Councillor Mike Sol.
Thank you. Can I just ask for clarification on something? I think probably Marie needs to answer this one, and let's Pip knows the answer. I don't have many council homes in my ward. If I do get involved in issues, it tends to be someone saying something like, oh, I've had this kitchen 20 years and it's fallen apart. Can you see if I can get a new one? Or something like that. So I'm quite surprised when I look at the capital maintenance programme here. It talks about 60% refusal, tenant refusal. Does that really mean that 60% of people who are offered things like kitchens, windows and bathrooms actually say, I don't want one? Because that's, and if that is the case, is it, I don't want one at the moment because I'm on holiday next week? Or is it, I just don't want a new one? Because it's such a high number, just to understand a bit more about what that means.
Yeah, please go ahead and answer that if you can.
Sorry about that. Yes, it is a very high figure, and sometimes it's that people don't want the disruption and interference in daily life of, living without a kitchen for a period. I think that we need to do some further work in terms of follow-ups on those refusals to understand why and look at what we can do to mitigate and encourage people to have the work done. Because I think with such high refusal rates, then when you come to void properties, it ends up with kitchens and bathrooms that should have been done on a programme basis, you're having to do as part of the void work. So it's something that I'm really keen to unpick. And I think that it would be a really good engagement opportunity with tenants to say, okay, so what would help you to have the work done and how can we work with you differently? I think it also relates to how our contractors who are engaged to do programme works actually sort of communicate and engage with our residents as well. So it's something that we're going to pick up. It's something that we need to unpick further and look at ways that we can support people to have the work done.
Thanks, Marie. Has that figure changed over the years? I mean, is it a lot worse now than it was, for example, 5 years ago? Just, I mean, indicatively. I mean, you obviously don't know the figures exactly, but you've been,
I think
in the know for a long time.
we were all surprised by that figure, that it was so high, especially because, a number of the complaints that we get are around repairs and condition of kitchens, bathrooms and things like that. So we were quite surprised. We don't have the data because of obviously the transfer from East Kent Housing. But yeah, as I say, it's something that we really want to unpick.
Yeah,
and try and work
that's
with
really good.
people.
Just while I was just chatting, going back to what Pip raised about the not quite meeting the target for the targets are mercilessly high, aren't they? They're 95%. And that seems like almost an impossible target to me. But one thing I did notice that the satisfaction of most of the things was around 9 out of 10, 90%-ish, which, because sometimes you can get really high targets that people meet, but it's absolutely at the expense of everything that's in the way of customer service. And it seems to be that we've got a compromise there. So maybe those targets are ones that we need to monitor, which I think you've got on your watch there, Pip, haven't you? That so, certainly I think when we look back on the second batch of this working towards the end of the financial year, we'd be good to see how that changes. I think. Councillor.
Yeah, and I wonder if there might be a bit of an early lesson to learn on this with the number of refusals when we start looking at our mitigation for neutrality, and if we're looking to fit things into council homes in order to create credits, if 60% of people don't want it done, we may need to rethink that. Well, even if it is external, if they refuse it, we may need to look at that.
Yeah, Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you, Chair. I may be wrong. I'm mouthing desperately across the chamber at officers and they're nodding away. I think that those mitigation measures for nutrient neutrality, Mike, are what can be done external to the property and therefore don't need consent to go in. Although now I'm wondering, because you probably have to turn someone's water off momentarily, but you don't need access to the house. Yeah. And I think that not necessarily in the area of maintenance that you have interestingly raised, and it's something I've certainly, taken note of. But I do think that for things like stock condition surveys, often the people who are refusers, there are particular reasons why they don't want access to their property. Whereas if it's about turning the stopcock off outside and then turning it back on again, that's maybe not such an issue. It's about reluctance for people to come into their homes. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. I'll just get, I think I know the answer to this one as well, but I'll let Peter Peter Davis, just answer that one about the water regulation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Although you probably would know the answer, so you could have probably done it. Yeah, it is done external to the property, but it still needs the property owners, renters' consent. So because obviously they've got to switch stuff off for a period of time.
The plus point of that, of course, is that they will make a saving in their water bill. So there's a temptation there, but then you'd think it would be the same sort of argument about getting a new kitchen or bathroom or something, wouldn't you? But anyway, so it's an interesting point, but there we go. Yeah, we've all ended up being neutrality. Well, I wouldn't call it boring, but we have, haven't we, really? So, yeah. Sorry. Any more points to raise on that? Because that's quite an interesting piece of work. So that I think would be very much reflecting back on the end of a full year of the, but will pretty much be a full year of the new contract then, won't it? By the next time we do the next sort of figures, isn't it? So, okay. Any other points at all? We have to note this report, don't we? So are we happy to note the report? Okay, thank you very much for that. I'll just get myself tidied up and then we'll close the rest of the meeting. Okay, well, don't get too overly excited, but we're now into part B of the agenda and there's nothing in it. So what I'm going to announce now is the date and time of the next meeting, which will be the 3rd of February 2025. There's no urgent business that needs to be dealt with in public. We don't need to exclude the press or the public for any items in the that part of it. So in that case, I can close the meeting at 20:09. Thank you very much all.